In a State of the Union address to the Russian people on February 21st, President Vladimir Putin said Russia was ready for a long drawn-out step-by-step war if necessary. On that same day, US President Joe Biden was in Kyiv to show continued solidarity with the Ukrainians. He said the war would go on for as long as it takes to achieve victory against the Russians. A couple of days later, on February 24th, President Volodymyr Zelensky, in an address to his nation, said the defeat of the Russian forces was inevitable and he was certain of it. The US followed up on Biden's visit with the announcement of another $2 billion in military aid to Ukraine. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also visited Kyiv to mark the first anniversary of the conflict. Now it appears that a new spring military offensive by the Russians is underway. The Ukrainians, armed with the latest Western supplied weaponry, are waging counter-offensives. The Ukrainian government has reiterated that the war will end only after all lost territory, including the Crimean Peninsula, is regained. Military casualties on both sides have been high in what is turning out to be Europe's most devastating war since the Second World War. At one point last year, the Ukrainian authorities admitted they were losing over 100 soldiers a day. However, the scale of suffering caused by the war seems to be heavier on Ukraine's side. Despite the appeals made by world leaders to end the war, Putin seems to be not at all bothered about all that. He on Thursday said Russia had successfully tested a potent new strategic missile. The Russian president declined to rule out the possibility that it could carry out weapons tests involving nuclear explosions for the first time in more than 3 decades. Putin said for the first time that Moscow had successfully tested the Burovestnik, a nuclear-powered and nuclear-capable cruise missile with a potential range of many thousands of miles, according to a Reuters report. He also told an annual gathering of analysts and journalists that Russia had almost completed work on its Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile system, another key element of its new generation of nuclear weapons. Putin, who has repeatedly reminded the world of Russia's nuclear might since launching his invasion of Ukraine on February 24th last year, said no one in their right mind would use nuclear weapons against Russia. If such an attack was detected, he said, such a number of our missiles, hundreds would appear in the air that not a single enemy would have a chance of survival. Russia has not conducted a test involving a nuclear explosion since 1990, the year before the collapse of the Soviet Union. But Putin declined to rule out the possibility it could resume such testing. He noted that the US had not ratified the treaty that bans nuclear tests, whereas Russia had both signed and ratified it. It would be theoretically possible for the Duma, Russia's parliament, to revoke its ratification, he said. Military analysts say a resumption of nuclear testing by Russia, the US, or both would be profoundly destabilizing at a time when tensions between the two countries are greater than at any time in the past 60 years. In February, Putin suspended Russia's participation in the New START, that is Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, that limits the number of nuclear weapons each side can deploy. But there was no need, Putin said, for Russia to rewrite its doctrine on the actual use of nuclear weapons, which says it may fire them either in response to a nuclear strike against it or in the event of a threat to the existence of the state. Responding to a question from Russian analyst Sergei Karaganov, who has advocated lowering the threshold for nuclear use, Putin said, I simply don't see the need for this. He added, there is no situation today in which, say, something would threaten Russian statehood and the existence of the Russian state. No, I think no person of sound mind and clear memory would think of using nuclear weapons against Russia. Meanwhile, Putin said that the Indian government was acting independently in the interests of its citizens, and any efforts by the West to create a rift between Moscow and New Delhi are pointless.